Well, it's good to be back with you. How are you doing? How's everyone?
We're good.
Are you all ready for your faith statement sharing next week? Did you chat about it? Are you anxious?
Yes.
Maybe a little? All right. Terrified. Wow. I mean, we got to take it down a notch. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's you, us, and the elders. It's a really wonderful and warm morning together. So know that you will feel extremely supported next week when we do this. We just take turns coming forward and sharing that. But it's good to be back. Thanks for checking in. So I know if you weren't here the last 2 weeks since I wasn't with you, I do again apologize for the nature of the schedule that has us coming at such disparate times. One of the things I did on the Camino was to think about how to do this better next year. And I think next year we will move to a Wednesday night training session. Since all of your meetings are already on Wednesday nights, we'll just go ahead and move it to Wednesdays going forward, and there'll be a little more consistency. This year, as you know, kind of happened at the last minute. So I appreciate all your willingness to roll with us and to be here this time. Tonight, we're going to talk about kind of several different things, and I've given you some handouts I'll go over with you when we get to my part. But we're going to start tonight with prayer, so let us pray. On this day of remembrance, O God, we think of those people that we hold in our hearts who are always with us, but no longer in our living presence here. And we're grateful as we remember them and give you thanks, especially those who have helped mentor us in the faith and perhaps been a part of our own call to this leadership position that we are beginning to take now. We ask that their wisdom and their spirit would rest with us and continue to inspire us, and that we would also learn from the saints that were perhaps taught us in ways that we don't want to be. We're grateful for them too. And most of all, we're just so thankful for this place that we come together to know you, to serve you, to be challenged by you, to sometimes argue with you, and to find the way forward in your will and grace. So we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. We begin with Brent Ivy, my colleague tonight, and he is going to tell you about himself and what he's talking about. Yeah.
Is that what I'm doing?
Yeah. Whatever you're doing, you're telling.
Thank you all for letting me be with you.
Oh, here we go. Now you have to pass the torch or the mic in this case.
Is it a flaming mic?
Not
Flaming
yet, but
torch. It could be.
Could be flaming, Brent. I don't know.
I love it. Yeah, you're welcome. Is it good? Okay, fantastic. So you're probably wondering why a member and the tech guy is sitting in front of you today. So let me give you just a bit about my history. I don't want to make this about me for a second, but I want to share with you a bit about why I'm passionate about some of the things we're going to talk about. Most of my career has been involved in nonprofit administration, church administration, large and small, and it's been an incredible privilege to be involved I've been in independent school systems, churches, a counseling center, university, and now back here. So that's a bit about me and my background, and served in HR and finance and that kind of thing. So what I'd like to talk tonight about leadership with you. And I mean, obviously, right, it's why you're here. So what does, in your roles, as deacon role, as a deacon and or elder, what does leadership at First Pres mean to you? And this is popcorn. This is going to be very, very informal. So what does in your role, if you have an adjective, a phrase, what does this role mean to you? Or what do you see your job is? Even that's better. What do you see your job is as an elder or deacon, as a leader, elected leader here at First Pres?
Being present.
I love that, being present. What else? Outreach, beautiful.
Willingness to say yes.
That's beautiful, willingness to say yes.
Support.
Open heart, open mind.
Open heart, open mind. Served a UCC church with that and they truly were. What else?
Support.
Support. Say more about that, if you don't mind. Oh, Anki, it was you, sorry.
No, I think to provide support to different functions within the church. We're part of it, going to be part of committees as elders, as deacons. You're supporting the people and the functions in the church.
That's beautiful. Anki also has a history in church administration, if I remember correctly.
That's true.
Yes. Anything else? If nothing's bubbling up, that's fine. So I want to tell you about Wayne Hawkins and Speed Bump. So my first church out of college was a tiny little place in Houston. It was a 6,000 member church. We had 120 in the choir. And it was a very vibrant place, about 1,200 in worship, 2 services every week. And Wayne Hawkins was the administrator, Yale grad, and he decided, I am really kind of through with the corporate world, and I want to do something different with my life. And so Wayne was our administrator, and Jan Soller, was our controller. Now, sadly, Jan had earned the moniker of Speed Bump from the staff, and you might begin to guess why, right? Anything financial, you would literally run in to Jan. And Jan didn't see her role as much of a supportive one. She saw her role as more of control, more of a cop, right? Made sure that our books matched, generally accepted accounting procedures, the budget, we can't get over the budget. And so you get the picture. Wayne, on the other hand, and these dichotomy that existed in me as a young man, I'm like, this is amazing. So Wayne was, how can I support you in your ministry? How can I, as the administrator, leader in this church, help you further what you are doing? So I went to Wayne. I'm like, Wayne, we have a lot of handbell ringers. I need an entire whole new set of handbells. Now, if I'd have gone to Speed Bump, you can imagine what the answer, it's not in the budget, can't do it. Wayne, my new best friend, said, I get it. The program's growing. I don't know how we're going to do this, but we're going to find a way forward. And he was that way with everybody. That was my own selfish example, right? But sort of my first professional experience had these 2 vastly different approaches. Wayne came out of a place, from my perspective, out of a place of love and abundance. And Jan came out of control and scarcity. I like Jan very much. We just disagreed on how to run the church. So if you think for a second about a more control-oriented leadership style and a more empowering and enabling in the good way, right? Not enabling bad, but enabling behavior. Can you think of some characteristics about that leadership? If you think about, and it could be someplace you've worked, where you lived or worked in a more control-based environment. Think about some of the characteristics and what they might be. And again, just popcorn it. Something that comes to mind to me is very top-down, right?
As a program manager, right, it's all about timing and budget, right? So
Don't ask questions.
right, very, very strict.
Beautiful, very strict. Don't ask questions. What else? We've all worked there.
Keep your head down.
Keep your head down.
Rigidity.
Rigidity, beautiful. Yes?
Quarterly reviews.
Quarterly reviews, yes. Depending on how they're structured, right?
Are we talking about your marriage?
Oh. So one of the roads I wrote down, Dan, I think is monitoring, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? It's a very monitored culture, isn't it? Yeah. Right, flip that. If you were in an organization that had a more empowering, supportive, enabling management style from the leadership, what are some characteristics that might be?
More of a partnership.
Absolutely, more of a partnership. Yes, say that again. Sorry, I
More
talked.
of a partnership, less stress on the hierarchy.
Less stress on the hierarchy, yes.
Accommodating.
Accommodating.
Emphasis on growth as opposed to success.
I'll pay you later. Emphasis on growth as opposed to success, which then begs the question, what really is success, right? We'll talk about that in a minute.
Right, because success can be something that you encourage in others,
Beautiful.
whatever that means to them.
And to have, for leaders to be secure enough in themselves to allow that to develop is something that I've experienced, right? Yeah. So that would mean to say, like, maybe even a sense, you're fostering a sense of agency within each person, right? What are other things? What do you think such an environment might actually foster in the workforce, or in our case, with the church and the volunteers and the membership, if we led with a more enabling, empowering leadership style as opposed to controlling?
Team building.
Absolutely. Team building. What else?
More engagement.
Engagement?
Establishes trust.
Yes. Who said that? Beautiful. Establishes trust. And I would go so far to say and we're dealing with dichotomies here, right? But the opposite side, to me, erodes trust. It doesn't serve to develop that. That's beautiful. Thank you. What else? Different kind of accountability, right? And goes back to what Mel said about what's success look like, right? How about engagement on a whole? Right, to me, I'm going to be much more engaged in an environment that is supportive and enabling rather than you can't do this. Let's, again, back to Wayne and speed bump. How can we find a way to make this happen, right?
Ownership.
Ownership. Excellent. Wow, that's beautiful.
Flexibility.
Flexibility. Yes.
And adaptability.
Adaptability, flexibility. Wow. Lots of positive things from my perspective, and it sounds like from yours too.
It's important, though, that you have an idea of where you're going.
So she said, important to have an idea where you're going. Could not agree more. So it's from my perspective, a shift in leadership style, right? So let's set the direction. Let's set, I hate to use the word goal, let's set our destination. But then let's have some flexibility about how we get from here to there, as opposed to micromanaging each step along the way, right? That's what resonates to me. Is that kind of where you were thinking, or?
Yeah, I'm thinking that sometimes you need more than one way of thinking about the process. I've been in organizations that were very flexible and very great and ran themselves straight into bankruptcy.
Absolutely.
You know, and so like that, because everybody wanted to do it their own way, and the way they wanted to do it, and things like that was great. And nobody had a sense of where they were trying to get to. And so no decisions got made that took you places. Hard decisions sometimes.
For sure.
That's where I'm sort of sympathetic to the speed bump. Or maybe not her, but the idea that once in a while you have to take, is that going to take us to the place which we're all trying to get to? If it is, then we're all there.
Right.
And we can be behind it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't always be in favor of handbills if it took us away from the main thing.
It's, I think of this versus this. That's the image for me, is this closed fist, no light gets in. We're going to get there.
I'm thinking there.
Yeah,
If I have to use a hand gesture, it wants to be like,
yeah, there.
are we going there? If we're
Yeah.
going there, then we're good. If we're not, then
I like that.
we're just going.
What do you think the perception, and thank you, what do you think the perception is outside looking in to each type of organization? And I do mean this sincerely, right? I'm not trying to weight the conversation. But if you're outside, and obviously think about First Pres, right, and outside looking in, do you think the leadership style here would make an impact on those looking in that may not, well, you may belong, maybe you're not yet a member? Do you think there's a differing perspective from the outside looking in?
From the outside looking in, the thing that you notice first and foremost is how welcoming it is. You know, that all sorts of people are welcome.
One would hope,
to be
right?
there and to participate.
Right.
And once you're inside too, I think you still feel that way.
Yeah. Anything else on that one?
I've been on staff long enough that there were times when I think people looked at the way we were in worship, and you could tell that we were all focused on sort of the top-down model, there was just kind of a sense of fear of messing up. And we were very afraid of saying the wrong thing in worship, making a mistake. Like, there's something about that that comes from that model. Whereas now, when I look at how we are with, let's say, DPH, he is very self-deferential, and he makes a lot of mistakes. In a way, I think he sometimes does it purposefully to say it's okay.
I wonder once in a while.
Yeah, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure some of them are legit, but others I think he creates. But you can tell that he's giving permission. He'll stand with the ministers and he'll say, you know, what a team. It's never about him as the person in charge, and
Agreed.
that's not always the case in a large church with a senior chiseled pastor up there does what they do every Sunday. It's not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think as staff you experience that, and members feel that. They know when it's a more humble leader and a more generous model of working together, and I really appreciate that.
Me too, and I concur with Mel completely. I've been in both. And when it is that more chiseled, right, it trickles down, it trickles out, it can't help but, right? And so several things that strive for perfection, right, deadly, horrible goal, can't attain it. Spin your wheels all day long, right? And you're never going to get there. Why would you even want to try? So I'm thinking of this sort of balancing piece. Let's talk about the church for a second. Actually, I'm going to jump, and then we'll come back. This is really good, and I appreciate your input. So I'm going to read some quotes. This may seem kind of random to throw in here, but I'm going to read some quotes. These are, you may know Brené Brown. She is a psychotherapist, teaches at the University of Houston, and she wrote a book called The Gifts of Imperfection. And I'm just going to read a few things, and then I want to talk specifically about the church. But since Mel so beautifully led into this, I think this is perfect. Brené Brown suggests that the autonomy, I'm going to try again. Brené Brown suggests that the anatomy of authenticity means cultivating the courage to be imperfect. To become more authentic and courageous, we need to set boundaries and allow ourselves to be vulnerable. We also need to practice more compassion, which stems from deep self-acceptance and knowing that we're a combination of strengths and struggles. Finally, it's essential to nurture the connection and sense of belonging that can only happen when we believe we're enough, which requires us to develop deep self-compassion. Perfectionism isn't the same thing as striving to be your best. Perfectionism tries to convince us that if we look perfect and act perfect, we can minimize or avoid the pain of blame, judgment, and shame. Perfectionism is a shield. It's also very different from self-improvement. At its core, perfectionism is about trying to earn approval and acceptance. We believe that what we accomplish dictates our worth. Been there, done that. Brown also speaks to the crucial factor in resilience as recognizing and celebrating that we're all inextricably connected to each other by a power greater than us. Our connection to that power and to one another is grounded in love and compassion. Brown advises practicing spirituality to bring about a sense of perspective, meaning, and purpose. So if we look at the church, right, and take everything we talked, and thank you for participating so beautifully. Let's begin to kind of focus in our conversation and let's talk about the church and First Pres. And you've heard DPH talk about the business of the church versus the church as a business, right? I had a boss, horrible human being, who would over and over say in a pretty darn highly respected educational institution, we're not a church. And all I could think of, we would be so much better if we could just let a little bit of that in. But hers was, she was very fear-based in her management style, while all around her was this open, abundance, sense of empowerment. And so we had this business team steeped in angst and anxiety, while everything, it was such a, again, another stark contrast. So if you look at the church, and the church is a business versus the business of the church, are there ways in which the church has to function as a business? Right? I mean, it goes without saying, okay, what would some of those things be? Just name it. What are ways in which we have to function as a business? Pay the staff. And there's regulations around how you pay the staff, and it's very controlled, right? We empower the staff by paying them, but the way we go about that is very regulated. Beautiful, thank you.
To pay the utilities.
Pay the utilities, right?
Yeah, eat the building.
Yep. Other ways we have to operate as a business.
To hire people.
Have to hire people. Yep. Ways to do that well and ways to do that very poorly.
Financials.
Sometimes you got to fire people. Ways to do that well and ways to do that very poorly. I'm looking out here and seeing some life safety systems in the hallway, right?
And the training that goes with those.
And the training that goes with those, right? So what are ways, and there's a comfort for some. This is not a criticism, but let's recognize there's a comfort for some in being in an environment that is tightly controlled, right? Nothing's going to fall off the table. Everything is going to be perfect. Hope, right? All regulated. Life goes on. What are ways in which we might be called as a church to operate differently than the world around us? It could be something internal to operations. It could be external facing. How are we called to be different in the world?
Like we're not like governed by like profit. Like we don't have like we should not have a board of investors to please or whose priorities we should be taking into account.
So let's talk about bottom line for a second. Let's go back to Mel's comment and yours. Thank you. So what is our bottom line? We have financial statements, right? We have a budget. We have, thank you, a stewardship campaign. What's our bottom line?
Do people like to want to come to church? Do they want to be here?
Do we want to
Do
be
they
part of
wanna
us?
serve?
We want to worship God.
Want to worship God?
Yeah, I think there's that the membership growth, but then also the external looking. And I think that I've heard that already just in my short time here. There's a lot of great things happening internally. We could do more in the community.
In the community, so make some of our work outward, more outward facing.
Depends on what our mission is. If different churches have different missions. They need an urban mission, or they're meeting their mission is really the homeless, or their mission is families, or their mission is, different churches have different. I've worked in a lot of different churches, and they've been very, very different in terms of who they serve and what they do.
Absolutely.
And where they are. But the ones that have been really cool knew what their main goal was.
Yes.
And served that. And that almost always fell under something that Jesus would have liked.
It's a good thing. For a Christian church, it's a good thing. Making God's love visible, right? To a world that so desperately needs to feel it and hear it and see it. So what does that say about a deficit or a surplus at the end of the operating year? If our goal is to make God's love visible and sending programs out, what about the budget? What about the monthly financials?
It's a surplus, it's an opportunity.
Okay, I like that, opportunity.
Oh, so is a deficit.
To what she said, deficit is also an opportunity. I love that. I agree, completely. So if we're going to operate differently than the world, which I believe we're called to do, which I believe we do such a beautiful job of constantly, daily, and we're going to make God's love visible, how can we operate differently? What does that look like? Maybe that's rhetorical at this point. and you can ponder that anew, while you're brushing your teeth and showering. Go for it, yeah.
Knew about this as a church. How, and I hate to use the term, but how does the church measure success? I want to think growth in new members would be one way. We talk about programs, but how is that discussed? Like, how well are we doing as a church? And again, numbers are numbers, and I hate to always bring that up, but how are the numbers? How are we doing as a church? And how is that looked at the church leadership?
You're asking all the right questions. And we can get caught in the trappings of, I believe, how many members did we add? How many are sitting in the loft in the choir? How many Sunday school classes do we have? That's really easy to go down that path. And I think it's very common. And I think those numbers can be helpful. But I think, in my opinion, they can also be stifling. If we are, right, back to what is our mission, what is our goal? So just a thought here, if we're making God's love visible and knowing the folks and the faces I see in this room, yes, having more people join the party of this amazing community is a beautiful thing. But is that a measure of success?
Well, that's my question, because I don't know.
What do you think?
I have to tell you one thing. I went to a church in Cincinnati one time with some friends that lived down there, and the pastor announced how many butts were in the seats as a sign of success. Like how they had reached out to the various campuses. And we have so many butts in the seat this Sunday. And I thought about that. I mean, that's a little too Costco, I think, or profit oriented. I just was crazy that he said that. But I'm serious. You talk about the programs, and so at one point there are expenses, and that question, is it worth it? I talked to Dave Vandermeer about the mega churches and the music type and bringing young people in. And, that's not our style here at First Pres. And so, I hate to say, but is there competition for new members, for young people? And how is that looked at? And
I appreciate that. And I've always, my take has always been, I believe that there are churches that provide a worship experience that you're referencing really well. And to that I say, go for it. I think you run into a trap when you try to be all things to all people. Then I think you're precious little to anybody. But that's my opinion. But if you can figure out what you do really well, and I think there are some similar, what's your why? If you all know Simon Sinek's work, what's the why? Why are we here? Why do we come here? Why are you all sitting in this room? What's the why? And I do believe, and thank you for doing this, I do believe it's more than butts in the pews. Now, I'm not going to be so fundamentalist as to say the number of souls saved and all that. I'm not going there either. But I do think the markers of success for First Pres are very different than how many folks are in worship on a Sunday morning or how many classes we've offered. I think it's great that we can do it. But what does it feel like? I mean, that's kind of what I'm asking. What would it feel like to redefine that success? And how do you measure it? I would say the vitality that we experience in the hallways and in worship, that's amazing to me. And I think, wow, to accomplish that, to walk into the sanctuary and do class and feel welcome, to sit here and have this kind of open conversation, right? That Mel can stand in the pulpit and speak about topics that you would probably not hear in another church. And thanks be to God, we can be in this place and hear that word from the pulpit. So I hate to use the word success. To me, that's the life of the church, and that's a success. So back to the balance, and I think my time is probably up and I need to go. But we have to have a budget, right? We got to be responsible. We got to pay our staff. We need lights. We have plenty of heat apparently. We're going to work on all that, right? No ventilation. There we go. Yeah, hear about that in a minute. But you get, I think it's a both and. right? Figure out the ways that we need to function so that we're responsible and good stewards with all the resources that we have. But then what are, and truly this is almost rhetorical now and for you to meditate on, but what are the ways, you are a new class of leaders in this church, and we're so grateful that you said yes. Thank you. What are the ways that we can, or are we being called to operate differently in the world? And what might that success look like? Do we need to measure it? I don't know. Are the butts in the pews the byproduct of doing some really amazing work, getting our work out into the community, right? Those kind of things. That to me, all those pieces, that's the byproduct. The work that's happening here and the way that you're thinking right now and the excitement that I see every single day we come here, that to me is engaging and successful. Yeah.
I just have to say that the success for me is the number of times when I have had a friend or a new person in a pew next to me who remark on the feeling, the vibes in the sanctuary, and how, yeah, welcoming is part of the word, but it's just, it's like an openness and a gathering in of, I'm at a loss for words, but the feeling that you have here, and that was the feeling that I got the first time that I came here, was, oh my gosh, this is just a wonderful place. There's just, I feel comfortable and I feel welcomed and I feel at home. It's one of the reasons I like when the pastors say welcome home.
It's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Very powerful.
It's just, and that's, for me, that's success. And I've just seen it over and over again. I mean, Mel's got this thing called Greeters in the Pew. And man, it makes a huge difference. I mean, I've had several people just thank me for saying, hey, nice to meet you, and call them by name. And
awesome.
That's the success for me, is me feeling capable of doing that and offering that connection.
So to take that one step further, the vulnerability piece that we talked about, what would that look like if every one of us in this room on any Sunday morning saw a face that we did not know, made ourselves vulnerable, went up to them and said, welcome, we are so glad you were here. Hi, I'm Brent. It'd make a huge, huge difference, right?
I mean, you were speaking to that earlier, was the vitality that you feel.
Mm-hmm.
That's what, in personal opinion again, that's what I think we should make sure everyone who enters the church building, or maybe even outside, feels.
Well, that's where I'm going next. So,
Yeah.
right, so if we're here, we got this going on, back to Kurt saying, how can we make that outward facing, right?
Yeah.
How can that be a both and? How can we expand that in our mission work and in opportunities outside that allow us to grow and allow others to grow? You all, this was fun. Thank you. I appreciate your thoughts. I appreciate your leadership and good stuff.
I just think about how important it is that we be authentic as a congregation and know who we are and what our strengths are. But then if we have that, we talked about radical hospitality a lot here, so we know who we are, we're trying to seek and follow the will of God, but we want to be able to communicate that clearly to people who we are. And also we want to be able to welcome everyone into it that wishes to be a part of it. And I think that's where we're going to hear a little bit more from Linda and a little bit about some of those kinds of things that help us knowing who we are, then to communicate and to welcome others in. One of the best things I get to do is to meet people that come here. They attend once, and then I get to talk to them on the phone, and they may say, I'm just church shopping right now, and they're new to town. And I'll say, well, what are you looking for in a congregation? What is it that you would make you feel welcome somewhere? And then we talk about it, and I tell them about the other churches in town, what I know about them, and where they might want to try first, always letting them know that there's a place for them here. But it's okay to say, I'm looking for something specific, but then I'll also know it when I find it by the feelings. And so I think, Bill, in terms of what success is measured in, it's being who we are and doing that well in a way that whoever would come would be able to find a place, if this is the place for them. And for some people, it's not. I can get very competitive with other churches when I'm looking at the advertisements of what are they doing versus what are we doing. And then I step back and say, wait a minute, are they being authentic to who they are? Then that's going to be success for them and for us too.
Thank you.
Can I piggyback on something, just real quick? So, in a lot of these meetings, one of the things that's kind of mentioned frequently is the welcomeness of our church, which it is. But that is something that we can't ever sit back on our laurels. That is something that has to take place actively every Sunday. Every Sunday, someone is in there who's never been in there, who might be very uncomfortable being there, and having that one person genuinely and authentically. So it's something that we have to have the mindset of, and we can't just say, oh, we're such a welcoming church. That has to happen every Sunday. And that's hard. That's hard.
It is. And you can't assume that everyone wants you to be super welcoming. I mean, I have a member, she's not a member here, but she's been coming for years, and I watch her every Sunday, and her whole demeanor is, please don't speak to me, please don't speak to me, please don't speak to me. And I've watched to see if anyone can overcome that barrier. She knows me, and she knows a few others on staff, but there's something about her that makes that extra hard. So how do we do a welcoming, radical hospitality for someone that's bringing a kind of pain or baggage that we can't understand, but also do it the right way for people that are ready for that? The day that Keanu came to church for the first time, walked in our sanctuary and sat down in the second row, Brent was giving the Faith in Action. It was about a year ago. And I don't know if you would talk about that, but it just was like such a stunning way of feeling welcomed into the church by the way that this guy handles himself and who he is.
We're glad you're here.
So how we communicate who we are once we know that is really important, and how we operate in the way that things get done. And we frankly couldn't get much done without Brent, and we could get nothing done without Linda.
Isn't that the
So
truth?
Linda Robinson, Linda knows is the
That's
pillar
me.
of the church. It's Jesus and Linda Robinson.
Right,
So
all right, thank you. I am sitting here saying, tag me in, man, tag me in. I want to speak to this. This is the most enthusiastic staff, and we don't talk about success like that at all. We don't talk about numbers. I'm the numbers person, not the financial numbers person, but I'm the one that does get the report of how many butts are in the pews, but I also get the report of how many people are listening in and not listening in, they're worshiping with us via live stream. And I'm one of those people because most weekends I'm not in town. I am so privileged to be the one that opens the letter from a 90-year-old woman who hasn't set foot in this church because of health reasons for years and years. And she is thanking us because the staff signed our names on a card and sent it to her. This is who this church is. And that, to me, that getting that letter, I've got chills right now from getting that letter. And we get them all the time. We, 2 or 3 or 4 a month, we get them. And I also want to say, because many of you are serving for the first time, a number of you are repeat elders and deacons, but for those of you that are new in particular, and those of you that are younger in particular, the Presbyterian Church, and particularly First Pres Ann Arbor, isn't and shouldn't be a staff-led church. It shouldn't be up to us of how we measure success, right? You are the church leaders. We are all the church leaders. We are all the ministers. I'm a minister here. I felt the call when I came in, and I came in as office manager, and now I'm operations manager. What in the world is that, right? But I felt very called to be in this ministry, and it is just a real privilege to be here. So you guys are asking great questions. You're responding. I loved hearing it, and thank you so much for having me here tonight. So I'm going to give you some nuts and bolts, and hopefully this will be helpful whether you've served once, you've never served, or you've served 5 times. Things change. So we're going to start out just briefly with the admin team. Who we are, and real importantly, not how can we serve you or what can we do for you, but how can we partner with you, because we are all in ministry together. And you've been called to do some really, really hard work. I am an elder in the Presbyterian Church. I've been clerk of session in a really large Presbyterian church, larger than this one. It was hard work. I've never been a deacon. because, wow, I was glad that I was never asked, because deacons work so very incredibly hard. My hats are off to you, and it truly is a calling. But know that you're not in it alone. You have each other, and you have the staff of this church, whether it's pastoral staff, program staff, or the administrative staff. We're here to work in partnership with you. So who we are, basically, if you have a finance problem, you're going to go to the finance manager. That's pretty simple, right? And that's Anna Miller. Our offices are on the this floor, but the other wing of the building. So you'll find us there. Esther Patrick, if you've not met her yet, she's been here a little over a year. She is an absolutely incredibly talented person with everything communications. She has been out for 3 weeks with her father in his last weeks, and he has now passed, and she has returned or is returning to us this week. So we're very grateful for that. She is really just a dynamo, and many of you will be working personally with her in your ministries here. Adrian Prunianu is our facilities manager, and anything related to the building. He's the one that you first would think of going to. So again, I asked the question, what is an operations manager and what does one do? All the stuff that those three don't do. That's been my answer. I do a lot of tasks, and I've named some of those things here. Not that my other colleagues couldn't name that many and more, but these are the things where I think I might be working with you, assisting you, being of some help to you. We're ably supported by 3 part-time staff members. These are paid staffers. Pat Gilbreth in the Welcome Center, she's our coordinator. Brent Ivy, who just spoke to you, he works part-time as our tech coordinator. He does so much more than that. He's just an incredible human being. And then Mary Muhlenberg, who's the Welcome Center assistant. We did have a couple of people in the office assisting me or assisting everybody, administrative assistants, and we lost both of those positions in the freeze this year. So we are working harder. It's not business as usual. You've heard DPH mention that probably quite a few times during the time he's been here with us. Our team is actively engaging and working smarter with a tighter budget, and we're looking pretty good. The numbers, we do look at the numbers. We look up numbers, right? They matter, and we are looking pretty good. The hard work, you want to know that your hard work is paid. You want to know that, or paid off, I mean. You want to know that your sacrifices, you want to know that those extra 6 hours that you worked last week were valuable, right, to the mission, to the organization, and we're seeing some really good things. So for those of you that have been around, maybe this is your second time to be an elder, second or third or fourth time to be a deacon, some things have changed, again, because it's not business as usual. You're not going to see somebody sitting in that main office, but you're going to see people around, and you just ask, who can help me? Or you call me, or you email me, or you make sure. I'll let you know when somebody can be here to give you some help. We've migrated from Church Post to MailChimp this year. We're not all tech savvy, so some of this was hard for staff to do, but we're beginning to really reap the rewards now that we're on the let's use it end and we understand it end. We're migrating from, not completely, but we're almost off of Google and into Microsoft, so we're doing a lot of work in Teams. We've migrated almost everything from Sign Up Genius to Cognito Forms, which gives us a great deal more flexibility. We have installed 3 electronic calendars, 1 on each floor, which is wonderful for wayfinding. When people look at them, it's kind of funny how I don't know where to go, and where did you look at those? A revamp of our print and electronic publications, thanks to Esther. And then, as I said, 3, not just 2 frozen assistant positions, but Anna Miller in the finance office, they lost a position there as well. Okay, what's coming? What's coming is I need a drink of water. Excuse me just a minute. I brought it with me and then didn't bring it up. Right. Thank you. It's hiding down here. We promise that we're going to have a more robust, vibrant website, and that will be a frustration for you as you begin your work. You're going to want things to be updated, and every ask is going to be very important. But we are strapped as thin as we can be. We've been developing a new website for over a year. When Esther came on board, she had worked for us off-site when she still was living in Georgia. She had worked as a contractor for us for about 6 months, and that was a wonderful relationship. And I got this idea in my head, and yeah, we managed to get her here, which is fabulous. And we thought that her first priority would be the website, but it turned out that she had about 6 first priorities, and they all were first priorities. So website is coming. Just know we're doing the best we can. We're also going to start this year. We thought it would start actually it's not going to start probably until the first quarter of 24. It's going to be a quarterly magazine. It's replacing the old newsletter that we used to do monthly that was just printed in-house. This is going to be basically electronic, but we might have some hard copies that are available. We're always happy to make those for people that don't have use of a computer or choose not to use it. This is going to be like your college alumni magazine kind of thing, where we're reflecting on some stories that we want to tell. And it'll be the stories of, some of them will be the stories of successes at First Pres. How far have we come? And I think it's very exciting. The first issue is going to focus, one of the articles will focus on Jay Sandiford, who's been here with us for 10 years and now has moved into sabbatical, and then we'll be moving from sabbatical into retirement. So there's a wonderful article that's in production right now on him. Another focus will be on the resident ministry, which of course is a connection with him. There are going to be some adjustments to our staff organization chart, certainly with Jay Sandiford leaving, an associate pastor. There have to be some changes. He headed up our resident ministry program. We do have Hannah Lundberg, who stayed an extra year, and so you'll be hearing more changes about that as we move forward. But just sticking to what I'm free to talk about is my area of administration. We are going to be getting an executive administrator. This is something that I have pushed for 5 years. This church badly needs it. It's been a number of years. We've had one before, that preceded me. This has gone through personnel and it's gone through session, and it is a job description has been developed, and we're very hopeful that early in 2024 there will be an executive administrator. The other thing that I want to tell you that I'm free to say is that my position is going to be changing. I had planned to retire in a year and a half. And then some circumstances changed, and my husband had a stroke, you maybe have heard, and he's doing very, very well. But these things are like wake-up calls. And so we started reevaluating what we were doing. And he had just taken a new job outside of Ann Arbor. He's working in Saginaw, and he has a stroke a week later. So we've been reflecting on our lives. I did not want to leave First Pres, and God has provided that I don't have to leave First Pres because I've been offered to work remotely. A lot of the work that I do is I can do remotely. I'm on the computer basically all day long, taking care of things that lead ultimately to the PCUSA annual statistical report, clerk's reports each month. I do emails. A lot of the work that I do with and for deacons, alongside deacons and elders, I do via email or phone call, and all of that will continue. I wouldn't even have to tell many of you that I won't be sitting down the hall. It'll be like it was in the pandemic. We had the phones forwarded to northern Michigan, and it was me, and nobody knew that I wasn't there unless they asked, well, how is the weather in Ann Arbor? And I would have to say, well, I don't know. But anyway, we get the job done, right? It's a new day and age. So I will be, my office will still be here. There's a lot of there are a lot of valuable documents in there that we need to make sure are up, and they are basically on our server, but we are also moving off of the server. We're getting rid of a server, and we're going to the cloud. So the way that my job will morph to allow me to work my full hours, or maybe just 32, we're still in discussion discussion about that. But I'm going to be able to write protocols and work with Brent Ivy, our tech guy, and do the groundwork for getting stuff that needs to be up in the cloud to make sure that we don't lose our wonderful history and the documentation. It's just amazing how often we refer back to some of the documents over time. I'm also, it's been my privilege to be appointed to the Capital Campaign Committee and to the Annual Giving Committee, where I have the privilege of working with Kurt Boovey, and I have the privilege of working with Deanne and Dan. When DPH approached me about 4 months ago or 5 months ago, and he said, Linda, I need you to do this. Jay's leaving. There's nobody else. I'm like, you're kidding me, right? This is somebody's bad joke, right? Mm-hmm. I love it. I'm so honored. I am so impressed by the organization of this man and the enthusiasm. Kathy, everybody that came and did these faith in actions, and told, how do you measure success? You listen to that. You listen to not how many children we have in choir, but you listen to and you look at the excitement and the enthusiasm when they're up there, right? And I taught, previous to this, I was in another lifetime, I taught at the college level for about 23 or 4 years, North Carolina State University, if you're wondering. And, I learned there that if you reach one child, and a young adult in that case, if you reach one young adult, and I don't mean teaching them Spanish, great, is it 10 words, is it 100 words? No, I mean reaching the individual and giving them something, helping them to grow, that's all that matters. That's all that matters. I have, what's my vocabulary? An ally pin, right? Gendered. My vocabulary is bad on this. I wear this pin because I have a son who is gay, and I have a son-in-law whom I love so very dearly, and I have a daughter who is not gay, but who is the biggest ally in this world. She's a medical doctor, treating people, working with people who are transgender. That's a major calling of hers, and I'm so proud of these children. And every time that I wear my little pin, I kid you not, every time, somebody will come up to me and say, quietly, I like your pin. I like that. And what a privilege it is to be here. This is like a testimonial. This is what you do next week. You stand up, you open your mouth, and it just comes out. It helps that you're from the South, I think, right? Yeah, it just comes out. So anyway, I'm going to point out some, I brought some flyers for you. You can take them, you can read them. They're not going to mean a whole lot to you until it comes to that first event that you have to plan, or that first time that you really need some things run off of the copier, or you are a deacon and you lost your roster that I send you next month, and you're wondering what happened to that roster. I really could use a new one. So these are things that you're going to want to refer back to then. And what I want you to remember first and foremost is when you forget everything else, you call me. My phone will still work. Call the number here, you'll get me. You email me, you will get me. It won't matter to you that I'm sitting up there closer to my husband so that I can oversee his health and make sure that he takes it a little bit easier. So if you're planning a meeting or an event, we're talking about something that's a little bit beyond just your regular monthly committee meeting. I'm the person that gets you the room, I'm the person that gets you the Zoom, I'm the person that gets you the AV, etc. And so you're going to check the calendar yourself. The calendar, I'm not going to take the time to get it up here, but you go to the home page on the website, and there it says Boom Calendar, and right there it is. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the home page, there's a place that has forms there, sign-ups and forms, and all of this stuff is there. That's where we want to direct you to. So you're going to fill out an event or meeting form. We prefer you to do that. Even if I weren't going to be sitting up in Midland most of the time, I still prefer that because that form electronically goes to more people than just me. It goes to the person that might be sitting up the room, or it goes to the person that might be triggered to say, oh, they might need a cash box for that. I wonder if they have thought of that, that kind of thing. Do you need sign-ups for your event? Do you need audio visual? What are you pointing to? I'm sorry. Am I supposed to look up there? I don't know. I don't know what you're doing. Okay, I'll continue.
I need this procedure.
Okay. Do we have a sign-up? Do you need that? Oftentimes, yeah, we just can be helpful. Let's just leave it at that. What are our communications like? What options are available for you? On the next page of your packet is, once you go to the website, you're going to find this event or meeting request form, and it is extremely user-friendly. It goes, as I said, not just to me, but to a number of other people. If I see that you can't have the room you're requesting, I'll let you know. If I see that I think that you've asked for a really odd time for a meeting, like 4:30 in the morning instead of 4:30 in the afternoon, we'll be talking to make sure that that's what you wanted. The next one is the work order itself. Some of you that have been around for a while are familiar with the paper copies of the work order. And you still can get one of these if you're really a paper and pencil person. They're still in the main office. But you'll notice that they say custodian's work request. They're not truly a work order. When I came here 10 years ago, they must have just printed about 5,000 of these because we still have them and we no longer have custodians. So our real preference is that you go to work order. We do have people that come in and help our building, but it's a different system. Fill out the work order. We don't have the manpower right now to offer all the multitude of sit-ups that we used to have, and coffee sit-ups and tea services and things like that. But if there is an event that needs something, then we get it done. And this is what Brent was alluding to, and about not being a speed bump. I don't want to be a speed bump just to say, oh no, I can't do that setup for you, right? But if it's important for the whole, then we're going to find a way. I still can do it for you, but I can find a way for it to get done. So that's where we're moving with that. When you come to the page on communication channels, this was done by my colleague Esther Patrick, and this is just telling you the different places where your material, your event, your committee's work, what have you, can be published. But you don't get them all just because you want them all. She is so very, very thoughtful. She knows her stuff, and particularly with social media, she's taken us from way down here to way up here. And she's going to tell you why you need to be somewhere with publishing or with advertising, and why you don't really need to spend your money doing that. We used to do a lot of banners outside, and they cost money, and they're frequent targets of action, negative action by some of our folks passing by on the streets, maybe some youthful college students or something. Sometimes we're not really sure. But there are many, many other ways. Social media, great opportunity, a great platform. The website will be one day and one day soon. This e-newsletter that goes out every week, that's the Our Life Together that goes out on Fridays. That's a great opportunity. On the flip side of that piece of paper are the communication priorities. This is just a chart that Esther's worked out to kind of indicate to you what would be a high priority to get published in everything. And usually it's how many people does it serve? Is it something that's going to affect the entire congregation? Then yes, we're going to just hit it for all it's worth. Is it something that we know that we're only going to get 5 people in? It's still a very important thing, and we're going to advertise it. But if history tells us we're only going to get 5 people in for this event, then we're not going to maybe hit it for all it's worth. So that's information there. There is a communications request form, and that also is very user-friendly. Again, you can request it. That doesn't mean you're going to get it. So you want to follow up with Esther, and Esther's very, very easy to make an appointment with her, come in and sit down with her and plead your case, and she will do the best she can do. The other thing to know is that when you write a bulletin announcement or an announcement for Our Life Together or anything else, we're going to edit it. And that is, sometimes it's disappointing to people, but it basically has to do with good communication practices, right? And we used to have so many announcements that would go into our bulletin and then sit there that I think people just must, I know that page, that's not of any use to me because it looks the same way that it was last year. So we want to keep it fresh, we want to be new, we want to use pictures, we want to show that we're the lively congregation and truly the opening, welcoming congregation that we weren't. I've been here 10 years. We said we were because we wanted to be, and some of us were. But I have seen that change so much. I have seen it change from a dream to a reality. Do I think that we could do more? Sure, we always could. Should anybody come in here and be lonely? No, they shouldn't. They shouldn't. It should be all God's children are indeed welcome to home, right? I love it. I get chills when they say that too. Deacons, one thing we can do for you, and elders, we'd do it for you too if you had an application for it, and you might. We have stationery that's available to you. We like for your Mel's going to ask you to reach out to the people in your chapels. And we have cards that you can use. We're happy to give those to you. We have stationery in different sizes. We have envelopes in different sizes. We're happy to run labels for you. If hand addressing these things would be a problem, we can run you a set of labels. And we also can post them for you. You don't have to do that out of your own pocket. We can pay the postage and we get a little bit of a cut rate by doing it here. So this is just an introduction. Don't go on overload. I didn't want to shoot you with the garden hose or the fire hose, but just take away, if nothing else, take away that we're here to help you and work with you. And I'm so glad that you are here. Thank you.
For working remotely, thank God that's a possibility.
Yeah, I was pretty happy about that too.
So Dan and Deanne are here to talk a little bit about the Capcom and some other things that we're just happy to have them say. So Deanne and I over here.
Well, I'm going to do the talking.
Oh.
Oh gosh. Oh.
So, thank you for having me here tonight, and thank you all for Thanks so much. It's so important that you all said yes to the call. My name is Deanne Woodruff, and I am, where do I put this?
That's good. Pocket, perhaps?
I'll put it right here. So my name is Deanne Woodruff, and I'm an elder in the class of 2023. That means I am finishing my 3-year term at the end of this year. And I remember being in your shoes, training as an elder. I was eager and I was uncertain. But I'm here to tell you, truly my time as an elder has gone by in a flash. There's a lot of very interesting work for all of you to be involved in furthering the mission of this church that God planted here in Ann Arbor almost 200 years ago. So tonight I'm up here to give you a short overview of an exciting church-wide project that the session has been working on for over 5 years, the Capital Campaign. I've been the co-chair of the Capital Campaign Steering Committee, we call it CapCon, for the past 2 years, along with my husband Dan Midas, who's here tonight. He's an elder in training for the class of 2026. We thought it was really important to have membership on the session from the Capital Campaign for continuity. So Daniel, thank you for saying yes. Okay, so time is short tonight, and I realize you're kind of getting a lot of information, so I'm going to try to keep my remarks to about 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to be skipping all kinds of details about this Capital Campaign. So I want you to know, if you've got questions after I get done with this 10-minute presentation, Dan and I are always available to answer your questions. We're happy to go out for coffee with you. We're happy to take phone calls and talk. So tonight, I want you to go take away 3 main takeaways about the capital campaign. I want you to have an overview of what the capital campaign structure looks like with the session put together. I want you to leave and understand that we're going to be doing what we call phase 1, and that's going to be focusing on the sanctuary wing of our building. It's the oldest part of our campus. It's 85 years old. And then I want to talk a little bit about fundraising and how important it is to have the leadership of the church involved in the fundraising. Okay. So why is First Pres doing a capital campaign? As I said, our oldest part of our building is 85 years old, and our building needs work. The last capital campaign that was done by this congregation finished at the turn of the century, in 1999 to 2000. That's almost a quarter a century ago. We added Monteith, and we had the organ restored. So basically, we've been living in this building and using it without any kind of major investment in it for 23 years. So I just think about my own house. We have some tree work we just got the bids for. You know, it's a couple $1,000s, right? You just got to keep up at it. So that's left us with a very long list of things that need to be done to this building. So to address the situation, Session undertook the development of a strategic plan. And they started that process in about 2018, and they finished the strategic plan during the pandemic years in 2020, 2021. And this is what the capital campaign, CapCon, has been charged with in the strategic plan, of creating a transformative facility renovation plan that prioritizes reprogramming of space to accommodate contemporary methods of worship, mission, faith formation, and compassionate care. Initiate a capital campaign to fund deferred maintenance, life safety building requirements, and mission-driven priorities. So our first step in this process was to convene a group of 8 focus groups. And this was done in the spring of summer of last year. We included members of the congregation and the staff. We needed to see what they were thinking. What are the needs of this building? And the Capital Campaign Steering Committee, CapCon, came up with these guiding principles that were created from this input. So I would just like to remind you, this is a broad overview. We have pages and pages and pages of data from this process. And this is kind of the 5 things that we saw that came out of these focus groups. We want this church to be a welcoming experience. Brent and Linda talked about that so eloquently tonight. We want the capital campaign to enhance our worship experience, and we want to create transformative formation experiences. We want the building to be sustainable, and we also want it to be financially feasible. I mean, we could put on a $10 million or $100 million structure on this building, but could we really afford that? No, we have to be realistic about what this congregation can afford. So, Session created a committee structure for Presbyterians. This came out of the mind of Elder Sue Gott. She is the University of Michigan campus planner. And she was the chair of our strategic planning committee, and she's also a member of the Capital Campaign Steering Committee. So I'm going to go over this just really fast. I think you learned that all of our power in the Presbyterian Church comes out of the congregation, right? Everything flows out of the congregation. And we have a session of 24 elders that makes decisions for how to run this church. How does session exercise its power? How does it get work done? It has committees, okay? And these are 3 of the standing committees with standing, that have a lot of involvement with the capital campaign. But pretty much all the other committees do too. These are just the 3 most important. The Property Committee, the CapCon, the Capital Campaign Steering Committee, and the Finance Committee. So anything that has to do with the capital campaign always comes to session from the CapCon, okay? And the way CapCon does its work is we have 2 work groups, or subcommittees. We call them work groups in Presbyterian lingo. And we split it into 2 major areas. We have the building projects work group, and then we have the fundraising side of it, okay? And I'll go into this a little bit more in the following slides. The building projects work group oversees the architects and the contractors, everything that physically has to do with the building. And then the fundraising work group oversees the fundraising. And we have hired TWB of Chicago to be our fundraisers. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the work that we have done to date, where we are here in the fall of 2023. The Building Projects Work Group is co-chaired by Bill Upton and Rick Ingram. Rick Ingram is also an elder, and he is the chair of the worship committee. They are working on the first phase, and as I mentioned, we have put our attention on updating the sanctuary wing. Several reasons for that. It's the oldest part of the building. The most people use it. It has some serious deficits that we need to work on. I can talk a little bit more about that. So one of the first steps that we've done is we've engaged a liturgical designer, Mr. Terry Bird Eason of North Carolina, and he just started work in October. He was here 2 weeks ago. He toured our facility, and he has a wonderful resume of working with churches of all kinds of denominations. You'll be hearing a lot more about his work as we get started on that. He has 4 more meetings, 3 more meetings, 4 total. And we're anticipating that in January of next year, we're going to be seeing, we're going to be able to have that master plan shape up for us. Another name you might hear is A3C. That's a local architect here in Ann Arbor. And they're working with Terry Bird Eason to be kind of a local contact. The next thing we're doing is, if we're going to change the sanctuary, we're going to have to worry about acoustics, because that's the main use of that room, right? It's very important to hear the spoken word. It's very important to hear the music. And our acoustics are, there's a choir member. They could use improvement, right? The sound kind of goes up. We want it more to go out. So we're going to have Threshold Acoustics. They're coming from Chicago this very next Sunday, November 12th. They will be here to take a look. They'll be participating, listening to our worship service, so they can see how the room is really used. And then the last thing that's very important in this phase 1 is a HVAC study, heating, venting, ventilation, and air conditioning. The heating system that we have in this building is 85 years old, and it has been updated. Well, that's not even the right word. It's the same basic technology, and if you ever get a chance to go in the boiler room and take a look at it, elders, I would say grab that opportunity. It is kind of put together by baling wire and duct tape. So anyway, it's really something we need to look at to bring that more up to date. The V, the ventilation, we have no ventilation. This is a hot water system. The air does not get blown around at all. It is absolutely a minimal system. We found out this was a big life safety issue during the pandemic, right? Remember that? It's so much better if there's air changing around. We don't have that. And then the AC, air conditioning, we don't have it in the sanctuary. We have it in Monteith. That was built 25 years ago. We do have window units, I think, in just about every office. But hey, wouldn't that be great if we're changing the heating and ventilation to add the AC into the sanctuary? So those are the things that we're looking at in this phase 1. Then we're also going to, at the same time, the fundraising work group that's co-chaired by Bruce Thompson, who was an elder that finished last year. He's been chair of the finance committee. And then Susan Freilich is our other co-chair of the fundraising work group. She retired as a development officer at the University of Michigan, so she knows her stuff about fundraising. We've engaged TWB of Chicago, and they just started work at the beginning of October. They were in town last week, Thursday and Friday, to, Melissa Ann, you're shaking your head, so you got to meet them. Yeah, we're very excited. So the name of those two people from TWB who are going to be working with us are Ann Smith, and she's a young lady with about 20 years of experience in nonprofit fundraising, and Gene Brandt, he's the B of TWB. He's the co-counsel, and he is kind of semi-retired. He's a friend of Brent's, so he's coming out of retirement to kind of help us out, and he was an equally impressive gentleman. So we're very excited to have Ann and Gene join us. Okay, so what's going to happen in our next steps? We're going to finish developing this master plan for the sanctuary, update and renovation. So this includes the nave where everybody sits, the chancel where the choir and the lecterns are at. We're going to take a look at the social hall, the kitchen, and then again the HVAC system that's down in the basement. We're also working on developing a master plan for fundraising with TWB. So they have a 6-month contract. They started work in October. They'll be with us through March. And there's the big thing that they're helping us formulate right now, we've just started it, is what they call the silent fundraising phase. We'll be beginning that. So what I've learned being a co-chair of this is this silent phase is where we target or we identify potential very large donors. And what TWB is telling us, before we ever roll out this capital campaign to the general population of the church, we want to have raised about 40 to 60%. So we will be looking at people that can give us high 6-figure and 7-figure donations. Okay, so that's all going to be going on behind the scenes, and we are literally right now just starting that out, creating the committee to do these asks and identifying the people that have this potential. Okay, where you guys all come into this is you're the leadership of the church. And what TWB is telling us is it's very important for us to reach out to the leadership of the church. And we need 100% participation from our leadership. That's the deacons and the elders, to get behind this project. Because we need to go to silent donors, and then we need to go to the general body of the congregation and say, our leadership is behind us. So I'm just warning you, you're going to be getting a phone call really early in this process. And then we hope to start the general fundraising. It's a date to be decided, but we anticipate that's going to be in the spring of 2024. TWB tells us you can't really put an end date on this silent phase. It could go fast, it could go longer. We will not know until we actually get into that. Okay, what's going to happen after that? Well, we want to have the phase 1 plan totally complete. We want to have an idea of what we're going to do. We're going to start the fundraising with the congregation after we get the silent phase done. So that hopefully will be starting in 2024. When we get these two things done, we'll start to have an idea of how much money we can actually raise, okay? And that's going to help us prioritize these projects in this sanctuary wing. And what TWB tells us is like, we just kind of have to get in this a little bit and see how our donors will support us. So there's a lot of faith in this project. Wouldn't it be great if we could start construction in 2025? That would mean we'd have a clear idea of how much money we could raise. We'd have a clear idea of what our phase 1 plan could actually look like. And then I've added this little point here. This is a very exciting thing coming up. And you will be elders for this, for the 200th anniversary of First Pres that's going to be taking place in August of 2026. We had hoped we could have the whole thing completed by then, but we are on God's time. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so I just want to reiterate the 3 takeaways. I want you to have an understanding of the capital campaign structure. I want you to understand that we're going to be working on phase 1, that includes the sanctuary wing. And then the third thing is fundraising needs you. So, any questions? Kathy?
Is there a phase 2?
Depends on how much money we can raise. We hope. God willing. The creek don't rise.
But no parameters about what that, all we're focusing now is the sanctuary. There's no, I mean, there's been discussion, but nothing.
Well, okay, one part of this process, when we worked on the focus groups, we worked with A3C, the architects. We put together a dream plan. And that was over $32 million. We're not totally confident that we can raise that in the first phase. But if we raised $35 million, we would know exactly where that would go. Realistically, what we hope to raise in this phase 1, and don't take this as written in stone, it's a hope. If we could raise $12 to $18 million, we could renovate the sanctuary, we could take care of the HVAC system, and we might even have a little bit of money left over to start to do some of the other things that are on this very long list that we have on the $32 million dream list. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you everyone for your time tonight. Thank you, Melissa Ann.
So helpful, Deanna. I've been a part of this process from the beginning, but hearing you lay it out like that, I feel I just know so much more.
Good.
Thank you. It was
That's
really,
the point.
really engaging, really well done. So thank you all for what you're doing as well. Good. So we have a little bit of time left. I feel like tonight is a little bit of church training salad. You're getting a lot of different things, and I always hope to get you out of here on the early side if I can. So I'm going to tell you what I'm sending you home with, and I'm going to ask you to read it and be prepared, to understand what I'm giving you. You all did training last week. I think you broke into groups, and the deacons met with the deacon moderators, the elders met with the clerk of session, and I'm basically letting you have some information about what the other ones did. So if you are in the board of deacons, what were the elders learning over there in the side room? What are the things that they're being trained for? And what are the deacons being trained for? And it's important, I think, that you are knowledgeable as leaders about what the other board is doing, even if you don't do that specific kind of work. The thing that you all have in common as church leaders is that you are the face and some of the first contact that people have when they come to the church. You're at the new member breakfast next week. Perhaps you're there, perhaps you're meeting people in the pew, perhaps you're talking to people in the choir about what they're interested in and engaged in and what their needs are. And so I want you to be aware of how to perhaps steer them. A lot of times you're just going to say, I can't answer your question, let me send an email to Melissa Ann or to Linda Robinson, and that's fine. But if you understand how much goes on here, even if you can't name it all, I think you'll be more enthusiastic and a better interpreter, what we call program interpretation of what happens here at First Pres. But I also want you to keep in mind that one of the first things about being an officer is to be compassionate and caring. This is not a mechanical job. This is a job you do with your heart first and your spirit. And so I'm giving you this information so that you'll be able to read it and perhaps think about what the others are doing. When you look at what I gave you, let's start with the piece that says elder roles and responsibilities. This is what the elders were looking at last week with Linda Rex, the clerk of session. It tells you what these elders do in terms of being the session and their meetings and serving on committees, chairing committees, but also the visible signs of leadership to the congregation, like serving communion or being at fast track like we did today. We had a fast track meeting after church where we meet there to see if anybody wants to join. I was doing some other things and I walked in there at the final moment that I had to be there, and there were 4 new members sitting in the room. I had no idea any of those people were going to join today. That's how fast track works. You don't have to tell me you're joining. You just show up when the Spirit moves you, and today the Spirit was active in the lives of 4 people. So that's something that elders are a part of. They serve the congregation, ushers, greeters, all those kinds of things you'll be invited to do. Do you do it every week? No, but you will do it from time to time in addition to your regular committee expectations. I then gave you, as you go forward with this document, a list of the committees and kind of what, just a snapshot of what these committees do. So deacons, you may not have ever thought about what the specific committees are, but it's important you know, because as you get to know your new members, somebody that's just joined, you've signed them up, you take them the new member gift bag and you're at their house and you're asking them what they're sort of interested in the church. These things are important to keep in mind. The way we work in committees and work groups, Christian formation, everything that you see with teaching, congregational life, everything that we do around fellowship and bringing in members and helping people get integrated, including small groups and programs. Financial stewardship, we've just spent a lot of time talking about that. What used to be the technology committee, now called integrated communications. The personnel committee, one of the most fun places to serve and one of the hardest, including resident ministers, actively recruiting 2 or 3 every 2 years. That's a process that's going to start soon for the next batch. Mission and service. Obviously, we are here to serve the world and God's people. Our property, we've just talked about that. Safety committee, that's the newest one. You may not have heard of it. It started when we began to look at the fact that we had to lock the building. We had to make it possible for people to get in, but we also had to keep the building locked during the day. We were the last church in the downtown area to go to a locked building. It was a hard thing to do. Once we took a look at our safety needs, we were then obligated by our insurance companies to take these steps. And I think we've navigated that well, not perfectly. If you tried to use the code to get in tonight or your fob and it didn't work, we are far from perfect, but we are moving to a much safer situation here. We're still open on Sundays during the morning. Anybody can walk in. But this is something that you can read more about. What do they do when they meet? Worship and fine arts, we certainly see that every Sunday and what they're doing. Everything from Sunday morning worship to the Open Door Arts program, which is just, I mean, what a That's as much of a identifier of our church now as I think resident ministry is, which has always been kind of one of our jewels. The next few pieces are a spreadsheet, and this is really important. Elders, you may not have seen this when you met with Linda Rex last week. Does this look familiar? Okay, good. So this tells you what the committees are, and deacons, I want you to understand this document too. The green are the actual committees of the church, faith formation. The blue underneath are the work groups. There's a children and family work groups. There's a youth and family work group. There's an adult formation work group. And there's co-chairs and there's members of those groups that serve there. And there's a library committee. I don't think that library committee has met in a while, but we do have one. And then it might tell you what staff is in charge of those things. My newest job thing is that I'm now the staff liaison just to the adult formation work group. But that's a pretty big part of what goes on here on Sunday mornings after worship is adult formation. So I've picked up that piece from Jay. Then there are other parts, other kinds of work groups that come under that faith formation piece, like social justice action, climate justice, dismantling racism, and gun violence task force. These are task forces, all come under that one area of formation. Second committee is mission. The work group underneath that is local mission. Then you have finance, and there's plenty of work groups underneath that, like annual giving, thanks to Kurt Boovy. Integrated communications, again, used to be technology. Personnel, under that is the resident ministry work group. Faith formation, we talked about that. I think some things might have gotten missed. Congregational life. Under that is DIAA, diversity. Capital campaign, we talked about that. And the members of these committees are listed. You might have to get out your magnifying glass or your cheaters, but you can see that session requires us to turn in the names of people that are on these committees and to keep up. And what's really hard is if we don't talk about this and work with you elders, we have the same people on these committees year after year. Talk about not being able to grow and being stuck. When you have the same people doing the same things who are working very hard, it does not facilitate bringing in new voices of new members, creativity, new ideas. And also, you've heard of burnout. 10% of the people at a church doing 90% of the work. That is very common, and that is not how we want it to be. We want you to get a break. We want Deanne to go off a session and not have to be coming back on session a year from now after we've just given her a little time to take a breath. We have to keep facilitating leadership because that is what God calls us to, is to take a greater role. So that is for you to look at and to study a little bit. The other piece I'm giving you is regarding the deacons. Elders, I think, in many cases in my experience, elders have, unless they've served as a deacon, they have no idea really what deacons do. And they will ask us to do things for the session that are not very appropriate. For instance, when we do the annual giving, sometimes elders want deacons because we communicate with members of the church very directly in small groups. They want us to be a part of asking for pledges. We do not do that. We do not go to people and ask for pledges because we do the caregiving of the church, and we are not going to say you're going to get better care if you've turned your pledge card in. I don't know who pledges, I don't know what they pledge, and I don't want to know. I do have to send emails occasionally to members of the boards to say you haven't gotten your pledge in, and I try to do that in a blind copy kind of way and forget that I've seen your name, because many times we haven't turned in our pledge because we forgot. I will freely admit to you that I have not yet turned in my pledge for 2024. I was out of the country for 2 weeks. I will do it this week, Kurt. But it is important that as leaders we do that and we finish that process. But I don't want to know what members give. I want to know that we are all supporting the church in ways that we feel we can and giving of ourselves in every way. What you're going to see on this, though, is the roster for the Board of Deacons. Every deacon is assigned to a small group of members. There's a number that goes with that. We take the church and divide it into 4 quadrants, and that's what you see with the A, B, C, D. I've color-coded it. And you can see, if you're new deacons, where you're going to be serving. If you ask any church member, including yourself, what number chapel do you live in, you'd probably have no idea. It's just not something that people tend to know. But they will know that you're their deacon, and they hope to know you by name. And so that's an important piece of getting to know your chapel members. And you can see that we have 54 deacons. That's another reason why session members often ask us to do things. We only have 24 people on our board, but you have 54. So we do try to do more by way of communion serving and other things where we could take a little bit of load off of you because we have more of us. You'll also see in red at the bottom of the second page roster that the deacons have an executive board who administrates and helps run our meetings and keeps us going. And that group changes every year. I've given you the next piece, which is called the work of deacons, sympathy, witness, and service. It kind of tells you what we do, knowing our chapel members, checking our emails and responding, caring for members when they're not able to come, what are their needs, communicating with our chapel members, letting them know when we're having some events, maybe when the time change, maybe when we go to the summer schedule, deacons will reach out. That's an opportunity to say, we know you probably read the email, but maybe you missed it and you're going to want to know about that. Serve as a deacon on the board and come to meetings, stuff like that. I want you to be able to look through that. Flower delivery, communion serving, yada, yada, it goes on and on. Then this is the pastoral care brochure, which you can get in the Welcome Center, but it tells you very clearly that in pastoral care, deacons fit in with what we call a couple of other groups, Stephen ministers, you've probably heard of that, one-on-one caregivers, 50 hours of training, helping hands, people that just want to volunteer once. I want to take a meal because Bill Urban had his knee replaced and he needs meals for a couple days. That's something you can do. Those are the kinds of things helping hand members do. And you can do that even as an elder or deacon. You can serve on helping hands. We have these two amazing parish nurses. Any pastoral care need you go to them with. We work as a team. We are fully communicative, the three of us. Then I talked a little bit more for deacons about pastoral care. Again, I'm asking the elders to read over this so that you have an idea of what your colleagues in ministry are doing. I left you an article here called You Look Great and Other Lies. This is a fabulous article about what to say and what not to say when you're caregiving. And elders, you will be caregiving too. If all we're doing is running the church, but we're not caring for our members and friends, even on your own board, then we are failing badly. So I want you to read that and be thinking about how to care for other people. You'll have opportunities to go with deacons to the hospital sometimes when we take communion. And so again, thinking about what it is, not just to do the mechanics of church government and church ministry, but how to truly open your heart to how God is moving in your life. Questions about any of that? These are things I want you to just read and look at. Send me questions and concerns about it. I'm not going to test you on it. A couple of things for next week. So, we're finally to the end of this level of our training. I hope that you will give me some feedback. I'll probably create what we just heard was called a cognito form so that you can there's a way for you to give me an evaluation of the training where you can communicate with me directly. This is my first time back doing this in a while in terms of the organization. And I know that you've probably learned a lot and there's some things that could have gone better. So I'm eager to hear from you about that as we go into next year's Wednesday schedule of officer training, which apparently I'll be doing for a while. And I'm excited about that. So I do want to hear from you. And I want to hear from you about the questions that you still have. There'll be a lot of them. The first year on your board, you're going to be a deer in the headlights. It just is a part of that. You're going to be learning, listening, asking questions, offering your input, not being afraid to ask those questions. Even if you thought you heard it and you missed it, keep your voice going. The second year it will come easier. And as you heard from Deanne, the third year, you're like, that just flew by. So give yourself some grace to do that. But whatever questions you're having, they're all good. Feel free to write to me, your moderators, Linda Rex, DPH. We're here for you. We're not so busy that we can't answer those questions in a timely fashion, have a cup of coffee with you, and help integrate you onto the boards. Next week, you will be bringing your faith statement. It's a 2-hour meeting in Monteith Hall, starting at 9 or a little bit before, probably 8:30. I'll put out some bagels, some coffee. Of course, we will have coffee, and some fruit. So you can come and have a little bit of schmooze time with each other. I hope that you've gotten to know each other fairly well in these meetings. We've tried to create some opportunity for that. And then there'll be a schedule of who's going to go when. I'm not going to put that together until I read your faith statements. which I'm asking for you to get to me by the end of the day on Thursday. I sent you an email before you came here, which means you have to write it out. It's not a off the top of your head kind of exercise. So I sent you the guidelines previously. If you need those again, let me know. There's some pretty clear instructions to what to think about. Some of you have already written them and sent them to me, but I want to see them in my email by the end of the day on Thursday. I may give you a bit of feedback. It wouldn't be much because I'm going to trust what you're doing, what the Holy Spirit's doing. But as I read those statements, it will help me craft the order in which you'll be giving them on Saturday. If you want to know the order before you come in on Saturday, I can do that. I will at least let the person that's going first know that they will be first. And it's a really, I know that it is nerve-wracking. I've heard that the people, the number one fear that Americans tend to harbor, the top fear is public speaking. Again, as I've said, for me it's sharks, but if for you it's public speaking, I know that coming into this meeting could be a little nerve-wracking. It is a really welcoming and warm group of people. I think you're going to enjoy it immensely. It's one of my favorite things to do. Hearing from each other your stories of how you came here to be here and what's meaningful for you about faith and life and service, whatever you choose to say, we will be touched by it deeply. So I trust that process. Mary Jane.
So basically what you're saying is that we come, we have some coffee and something to eat, and then one after another, we just read our statements?
Yep.
And there's no question, there's nothing else, we just read it and we're done?
There's no questions really.
Okay. Sorry. Go, sorry. Do it. I'm good, that's it.
It's not a conversation we're going to have with you. So it's not the session hearing your statements and then saying, well, but I don't know if I really understood that. There may be a random question about something that you bring up just because it's interesting and they want to know more about, oh, so you taught in Nepal. Tell me more about that. But generally it doesn't work that way. We're on a tight schedule. It's a game day. We want to get you home. We want to get this done. I mean, we know we're not going to have the game on in the hallway. So we have a limited amount of time to hear from, about 24 of you. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
So we read the statement that we send you?
Yeah.
As opposed to adding to it?
I'm not going to be upset if you enhance your statement a little bit from the night you give it to me to when you give it. Some people read things differently and they improvise. I'm good with that. I just need to know that it's done and I need to have a sense of the feeling so that I can put the order in correctly.
How much time do we have?
I'd have to go back to the guidelines that I sent you, but I think it's
350 words, but that's...
it's about 3 to 5. It's 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
I mean, and I would read it and time it out. And know that you're going to be, if you're a little nervous like I am when I'm preaching, I tend to go a little bit faster than I intend. So maybe time yourself and just have a sense of it. I won't be timing you and I'm not going to get the hook. So if you have more to say out of your experience, we want to hear that. What I want you, two things I would say to you is one is, don't worry about keeping it super short. Don't worry about that. When I do weddings with couples, inevitably I give them the list of vows that they can look at to craft their wedding vow. And in many cases, they pick the very shortest one. It's the very shortest vow on the list because they know they're going to be nervous and they think that's pretty much says it all. I want them to choose what they're going to say that is what they truly believe, what they're promising for life. If it's a little longer, that's fine. Just don't worry about, did I get this in and quick enough? We want to hear from you. We want to hear what's in your heart, what's on your mind, what's in your spirit. That's what makes this really meaningful. And you have gotten to know each other better and you'll be supporting each other. Okay? All right, now, I really converted that. Okay, so as we end today, am I just going to read something in closing that Anki will have heard this before because we used it on our Portuguese and Spain travels the last 2 weeks, and we had you in our hearts with us while we were there. We really wanted to be here with you for the most part, but we did have an awesome adventure. And every day, our pilgrims, as we walked 10 to 12 to 13 miles for 9 straight days. And every day we had a word that was in our journal that we focused on, and some of the pilgrims would provide a morning devotion, and then in the evening we would talk about our experiences. And so spiritual pilgrimage is different than going on some kind of travel tour. But on one of the days, towards the end, the word was threshold. And a lot of times you'll hear from the pulpit us talking about living in the liminal space, but in the liminal space it's kind of the not yet. And that's where you are right now. You're in the not yet. You've not yet given your faith statement. You've not yet been ordained or installed to this position. You've not yet started your 3-year term. And I know if you're anything like me, you're carrying this seriously, and there's a significance to it, and maybe a little nervousness about it, and some fear that you're entering into something that is going to ask more of you than you have time to give, or that you're going to fail at, or that you're going to love doing so much you never want to give it up. That doesn't generally happen, but it can happen. And so I think you are really on a threshold now, a threshold of crossing over into something new. And so I'm going to offer this reading from a wonderful writer, may he rest in peace, John O'Donohue, who is an Irish poet and writer, and he wrote a piece to bless the space between us called Thresholds. And I'm reading it not just because you're standing on a threshold, but because today is All Saints Sunday. And it's my favorite day in the life of the church. And on All Saints Sunday, when we read the names of all those who have served, we're reading the names of people that served as elders and deacons in this congregation and in many other places. And at the end of the service, as I look up to the congregation from the front, I look out knowing that some of the people I am looking at are going to be names that are read next year. Every day that we have here is a gift. Every day that we have here is important to give of ourselves. And whatever you bring as you cross this threshold into serving the church, know that you are going to do the best that you can, and it's not going to be a failure. And even if you don't do it in the way that you think you want to or that you were initially called to, you are going to do it the best that you can, and God is going to take what you bring and say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." And you're going to hear those words at the end of your term, and we're going to say those words at your memorial service. So for the time that we have left on this planet, we go about serving God as faithfully as we can. These are the words threshold. To acknowledge and cross a new threshold is always a challenge. It demands courage and also a sense of trust in whatever is emerging. This becomes essential when a threshold opens suddenly in front of you, one for which you had no preparation or maybe limited officer training. This could be illness, suffering, or loss. Because we are so engaged with the world, we usually forget how fragile life can be and how vulnerable we always are. It only takes a couple of seconds for a life to change irreversibly. Suddenly you stand on completely strange ground, and a new course of life has to be embraced. Especially at such times, we desperately need blessing and protection. You look back at the life you've lived up to a few hours before, and it suddenly seems so far away. Think for a moment how across the world someone's life has just changed irrevocably, permanently, and not necessarily for the better. And everything that was once so steady and so reliable must now find a new way of unfolding. Though we know one another's names and recognize one another's faces, we never know what destiny shapes each life. This is a part of what we'll be thinking about next week. The script of individual destiny is secret. It is hidden behind and beneath the sequence of happenings that is continually unfolding for us, like the one you're doing now. Each life is a mystery that is never finally available to the mind's light or questions. That you are here is a huge affirmation. Somehow life needed you and wanted you to be. To sense and trust this primeval acceptance can open a vast spring of trust within the heart. It can free us into a natural courage that casts out fear and opens up our lives to become voyages of discovery and creativity and service and compassion. No threshold need be a threat but rather an invitation and a promise. Whatever comes, the great sacrament of life will remain faithful to us, blessing us always with visible signs of invisible grace. We merely need to trust. As Anki and Sid Smith read those words to us on our pilgrimage from Threshold, I read them to you and offer them to you, hoping that they bring you some comfort as you write your pieces and as you cross over into this threshold. We don't know what's around the corner. We do know who is there to meet us. So let us go in faith, and I'll see you on Saturday. Peace be with you.